Hey, boys and girls. Supposed to have a talk on about desire and electrons and other things with Immutable Destiny and Leophilius. But Leo, we haven't been able to get a hold of him for a day, so he hasn't.
Man, I hope he's okay.
Yeah, I do too, because I haven't really heard from him at all. And I, sent him, I sent him links to our show today and a bunch of other stuff.
Hope he's not being held captive by a bunch of conservatives.
Yeah, and Immutable is afraid to show up without Leo to back him up. So, and he insists that he's already ripped apart my scientism. Maybe I should call my view sci-fiantism.
There you go.
Because it
anytime
is.
You can create your own ism and put your name to it. That's preferable.
Yeah, sci-fiantism. I like that. So should we spell it like PSI?
Ooh.
Or psi would be PSI.
Scientism.
Sci-fi.
Yeah, we can do it. We can brand it. We can make it our brand.
Yeah, and then we could do sci. Let me see. Yeah,
I don't know who recommended this, but I started to watch from a episode of Unbelievable from February of 2020.
Oh yeah, I watched that. That was
Lee Cronin versus James Tour.
Yeah.
But Tour at the beginning just kept whining about things Lee said that he didn't like.
Right.
Even like when asked a direct question, what is your understanding of Lee's origin of life, view or hypothesis? He ignored that and went on to, and he spent several minutes on an offhand introductory comment that Lee made, basically saying, "Oh, your high school to the host." He said, "Oh, your high school biology was fine. Primordial soup and gases and stuff," and and that's all I said. It was just very short, not a lot of content, not a lot in there, but Tour was just harping and harping and harping on that. So I decided, well, I'm not going to watch this video. I'm going to watch the one before it that Tour is complaining about. So right now I'm I was like about 15 or 20 minutes into the Cronin versus Tour video, and they hadn't really discussed much science because of all of Tour's complaining.
Yeah.
You remember it that way?
Yeah, well, they kind of got along later on. I think Cronin explained his position to Tour, I think, pretty well, didn't he? So I think they got along later. You're talking about the one where Tour and Cronin were going at each other, right?
Yeah. But right now I'm looking at the I went back and looked at the Cronin. He had some guy sitting next to him, an older gentleman, and then the guy who was putting up $10 million for the people that find the path to origin of life or whatever.
Yeah, so I did not see the original Lee Cronin one. If you have a link to that, I'd like to watch that one.
Sure, I'll dig it up.
It was the same thing, but anyway. So Immutable, you showed up. You showed up.
Yeah, I did show up because apparently we're going to do this again.
We're going to do
okay,
this
gentlemen. First of all, I want to say here, what we have here is a failure to communicate. Okay, and I would, if you could, try to shake off any resentments or frustrations you might have. Try to have a hopeful outlook of an ability to communicate to one another. And
that doesn't follow.
If when somebody's not, when you feel like they're not understanding you or getting you, that's just part of the process. and sometimes it can be a long, stretched out, and frustrating process. But I think it's worth it.
Okay. So let's see. So my position on scientism is still, or we could call it sci-fiantism, because it's about physicalism mostly and about naturalism, is that all things can best be understood using science and starting with science. In fact, philosophy should start with science.
That we'll get to that later. But
okay, and that's a position that you believe you argued against?
No, I remember this very clearly in the question I asked, and I will still ask it: is knowledge a thing?
Yes, knowledge is okay. There's two ways to say this now. Okay, there's knowledge that you and I might talk about. If I say I have knowledge of, StreamYard,
as a general category,
okay.
Is it true that knowledge is a thing, or is it not?
Are you going to overtalk me through the entire thing, or before I get everything out?
You're asking about the semantics of the category, and I'm trying to elaborate on what that means, what the question is referring to.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out which version of knowledge you mean, because I use knowledge as a basically a biological definition of knowledge as a human, or basically an organism having knowledge of something about the organism basically is going to predispose it to act in a certain way based on an environment. So that would be knowledge as a thing. But then I'm not sure what your I never became sure of what your definition of knowledge is. So
knowledge to me is the ability to justify a belief.
Okay, to justify a belief. Okay, then that wouldn't be the same definition of knowledge that I'm using at all. That would be very different.
Yeah, so I'm referring to knowledge as being the ability of something to justify a belief.
The ability of something to justify a belief. Okay, for something to justify a belief, I think we are automatically have to be talking about human beings, and now we're talking about epistemology, which I was not talking about, but I would start to understand epistemology through my framework first before I would get to where you are. Okay, so but what does that have to do with all things? Why can't we use another example of a thing like desire or hope, or we could use we could say trees. Trees are best explained, can best be understood with science.
It doesn't matter what the particular is, but it happens to be the case that if you say one of the things we refer to as being knowledge, right, then you're saying, then the statement transforms to being all knowledge can be understood by science. But science itself is a form of knowledge.
Okay. What's wrong with
that? The issue is that is that one of the presuppositions you're making, right, makes that vacuously, makes that false inherently.
Which one?
So let's just review the process again. So one of the things you're doing, right, when you make the statement that all things can be understood by science, right, that's your claim.
Okay.
One of the particular things you can say about that statement is you can quantify it by something called knowledge, right?
Okay.
Now, science itself, right, to one of the things that science is as a category, is a form of knowledge.
Okay.
Right? But so what that means is that all knowledge can be understood by using a form of knowledge.
Yep.
In this case, scientific knowledge.
Yep, but they're two different things.
Right, but the issue is you have to presuppose, in this case, that knowledge is something which is already understood, right? Which is already something that is coherent and that can be used.
Okay,
but that's what you're trying to set about.
Which knowledge are you talking about? I talked about two different kinds of knowledge. Okay.
Any form of knowledge you want to engage in.
Okay, what forms are there? What forms are you talking about?
Personal knowledge, epistemic knowledge, the type of knowledge you refer to.
Yeah, the type of knowledge I'm referring to would be a disposition So an organism has knowledge, which was gained by moving through time. Okay, this
Mm-hmm.
with this delta. Okay, so it made some change in the organism, so that the organism is predisposed to act in some manner. So that would be knowledge. So that would be a reductive form of knowledge. So that would be my K. We call it KR, K reductive. So that's my reductive form of knowledge. Okay, when you're talking about scientific knowledge, that isn't exactly what you're talking about. It has a different meaning. It has a different semantics to it, right? You understand?
Well, let's go with the example you're bringing up, right? So if you're saying like knowledge in your case is the some predisposition of an organism to act in a particular way, I can still ask the question: how is it that an organism can come to know that process? Right?
How can humans come to know that process? Okay, that's where we get to scientism. Okay, now we're not talking about these organisms anymore. We're talking about us, right? You and me, standing up here with a God's eye view of things.
Humans are organisms, right? So that statement still is valid.
Right. Humans are organisms, and we know we're organisms, but we're also reasoning organisms. So what we try to do is we try to step out of ourselves and take this higher God's eye view of things and try to understand things from from some greater standpoint, which we call reason, right?
I think all organisms have the ability to reason to some extent, although
they do, but we're not talking about all organisms. We're talking about you and me right now, trying to understand science and knowledge and things like that. But
when when I say when I'm referring to another human being, and you say something like knowledge is some predisposition in the brain to act in a specific way, and I then ask the question, okay, well, how is it that you know, or how is it that you come to know that process, as true?
Okay, that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. And what I'm saying is that when you come to know, when you ask the question about how do you come to know that process is true, right, about knowledge.
Okay, who are you talking about now? Are you talking about these? Okay,
your form of knowledge.
Are you talking about these guys up here? Or are you talking about the organisms that we're trying to explain? Are you talking about us?
I'm talking about your form of knowledge.
Okay, so you're talking about us.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm not talking about us yet.
I thought that was the point of this conversation.
No, I'm talking about these guys down here, these organisms. Basically, we're starting with these simple organisms. So I'm not talking about how I come to know things. Okay, what you're doing is a category error. You're taking this outer version of us talking about knowledge, and you're saying, oh, we're not going to talk about this down here. We got to talk about ourselves first. Well, I'm saying that we can't just start talking about ourselves from inside of ourselves, because we will get lost. And that is making a category error. If you're talking about how humans acquire knowledge, you have to step out of human, and you have to understand how they. Oh shit! Hang on a second here. You understand that in order to talk about us, we have to step out of ourselves in order to observe the inner workings of humanity and human beings and organisms and things like that in order to talk about it, right? We can't start talking about it. We can't just start spitting words at each other from inside this frame up here. So when I talk about frames, what I mean is framing ourselves basically in this, we got one frame, which is our reasoning together and trying to understand something. And we got another frame, which is my physical frame, where I'm coming from, where we look down upon organisms and try to understand how they know things. You understand that? Is that clear?
I think your physical frame is, contained within the frame that I'm saying about giving a reason.
So, and that's why it's a category error, because now you're taking basically this, and you're trying to stuff it back in here, and we're going to get confused if we do that. We're going to end up with how you.
Let's not. For sake of argument, let's side that issue. Let's look aside. Let's ignore that issue for the time being.
We can't, because that is going to get us into so much trouble if you don't understand what I'm doing.
No,
I'm trying to explain to you how I approach these things, right?
Yeah,
And you're saying we have to ignore how I approach these things?
No, I'm saying let's ignore my objection for a moment, because I think I can manage to get my point across even using your own method.
Okay, so we're not going to talk about ourselves and how we acquire knowledge, and we're not going to, because up here is where we're talking about science, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
but my thing is, my thing as a skeptic is I want to ask the question, okay, fine, you have knowledge. That's people can have knowledge about all sorts of things. But I want to know how you know that thing is true, right?
okay,
I want to know,
what thing?
like, if you hold the position that the sky is, blue, or any proposition, right? I want to know how it is you understand the state of that proposition to be true or false.
Okay, you can't know for certain, but you can be pretty damn sure. You can be 99.999% certain, right?
I don't think knowledge is something that we can absolutely have like with 100% confidence interval. So
Right.
sure, I'm happy to use like a Bayesian form of knowledge, but
Okay.
nonetheless, the question is still right. If you're saying something is most likely the case to be true, I think a valid question to ask in response to that is how did you determine that thing is more likely to be true than not to be true? Right.
How do you determine something is more likely? Okay, so you're talking about justification of a belief.
Well, I'm asking, for instance, it's fine that something caused you to something predisposed you to believe something, right?
Okay.
But in what way is that process justified from another process, right? So I'm saying it's possible that another box, right, could contain a process that also yields what we're calling knowledge, right? That also yields the type of thing you hold to be true, like the sky being blue or whatever,
Okay.
right? And I'm saying, given that there's a possibility for either your form of something to be true, which is a predisposition of some sort, allegedly from the environment, right, to cause something to believe something, and my system, which is that there are some set of priors which contribute and justify a person holding a belief. How do we determine which of those is in fact the correct process, or are they both in fact correct? Because
Okay. I missed something about two different processes. So what are the two different processes?
so your process is saying, for instance, right, that there's some set of environmental factors or something or some set of variables that predisposes a person, right, to act in a certain way or to believe a certain thing.
Right.
And what I'm saying is that the belief, right, to some extent has justification, in terms of why a person has held that belief to be true or to be false,
Okay.
right? And so I'm saying that there's two accounts for how this belief could be derived. There's there's an account where there's some internal structure that justifies the belief, right? And that process is sufficient for somebody to say that a belief is more likely to be true rather than to be false. And I'm comparing that to your system of saying some environmental variables cause cause or predispose a person to hold some belief as true rather than not true.
Okay, so from the environment to justification, I guess I'm lost. Okay, so we have an organism here, right? We have
Yeah.
our sample organism moving through time, and here he in K0, our organism does not know anything about his own house. He just moved in. There was a change in the organism when he moves in and he walks around his house. This is the house down here. Okay, this is his house. His house is a weird house. It's got basically 2 rooms and Hang on a second here. It's got some steps going up, and he goes up here, and he can go into the second room. And it's got steps going down, so there's a set of steps. That's his house. So he walks into this house, and he walks around, and then there's something changes in his brain. So now he has knowledge of how his house works. So now in the future, out here, okay, if he wants to get warm, this is a fire down here, by the way. If he wants to get warm and he's, in this room, he knows that he goes up these steps, crosses that, goes down, and there's a fire there, right? So he knows that. Why does he have to justify that belief?
Because, for instance, right, if the claim is being made that there's an environment, that there's some set of internal variables which cause a person to believe, to make some belief as compared to some other belief, what I can do is I can design a hypothetical thought experiment, right? So what I can say is, okay, let's imagine two individuals. Let's imagine two twins, right?
Okay.
And let's imagine, for instance, that we put those two in the exact same conditions, right? And you expose them to some kind of stimuli. So maybe you put two young twins, in front of a red ball and a green ball that are sitting right next to each other, and you ask these twins regarding to express something about the balls, perhaps how that ball makes them feel, or how that ball if they like the ball or not. And one of the twins says yes, and the other says no.
Okay.
Right? And so these two individuals, these two agents, have been subjected to a set of environmental factors, right, which are identical. That was agreed upon in the hypothetical.
How can they be identical?
The environment doesn't change, right? We can imagine, for the sake of argument, that the environment is the exact same for each observer.
Okay, and the twins are absolutely identical. There's no epigenetic effects. They're just absolutely, totally a clone of each other.
No, the twins aren't identical. They were born at, at birth. They have, the same relative set of experiences. Now they're in the same environment, observing a common phenomenon.
Right. I have twins. They were born 4 minutes apart. One was severely physically handicapped because he was the second one out of the chute. He did not get the enzymatic effects that tell you that you're about to be born. The other one did. So they were 3 months apart in age, developmentally. So these are two different individuals, you understand?
Right.
Just at the get-go. Plus, one would follow the other one around, so obviously they don't have the same first-person perspective. So I'm not sure how your thought experiment works.
Well, what I'm saying is, look, we can take two people, right, and expose them to the same set of environmental stimuli, right?
Okay.
And ask them to form a belief on an object.
Okay.
And what I've done is, give a particular object, to ask them how they feel about, a red ball and a green ball or something like that. And
that's not a belief. That's a like. That's something I like or prefer.
Well, no, it's a belief about the object, right?
A belief about the object.
The child can say, "I believe,"
I believe
they can say something like, "I believe the object is comfy," or I believe the object looks nice, or something like that. They can express a belief about it. There's even by your definition, there's a predisposition for.
Okay, so you're saying these two almost identical people who have been in almost identical environments can form two different likes or two different beliefs.
Right, based upon the same environment.
Okay. But how would you say it's true that I like the green ball? Or false
that's an internal justification. That, to me, there's an internal justification the person makes in regards to in regards to their belief.
How would it be false? How would it be false that I like the green ball? I like the green ball. How would that be false?
That's not. I mean, it's a personal belief.
Okay, that's why you picked a really bad example. Let's talk about my house.
No, I can answer your question, right? So, when you subject a person, these twins, to a belief, like, does the ball look comfortable, right?
Does the
They
ball
can
look
either say, right, then they can either respond yes or no, which is
Oh.
akin to true or false, right? You're asking the twins to evaluate, on a relative scale, if they believe the ball to be comfortable or not comfortable.
okay?
And they can give, a response to that. One of them can say, yes, I think it's comfortable. And the other can say, no, I don't think it's comfortable.
Yeah, you skipped the category again, but it's going to be very hard to explain to you what you did. Yeah, I wish you'd stick with one example instead of going off into things that require. Now you've brought in desire, likes. You brought in things that aren't typically true and false in the world. And
I haven't mentioned the word desire. I've just mentioned a particular type of, a type of thing a person can express about an object, whether or not they like an object, or whether or not they don't like an object, or something like that.
Okay, but you're bringing in belief and you're bringing in all kinds of stuff. And we were talking about knowledge. So let's talk about something simpler.
Well, this conversation was framed around belief because the way you've defined knowledge, right, is some kind of environmental is some kind of predisposition of a person to believe to believe something about an object, right? And I'm assuming that you're referring to some kind of environment, be it external or internal or some combination of both.
Okay, I'm talking about two twins that both live together.
Right. We're talking about two twins that were born. They have had mostly identical experiences. Now we are exposing them to a set of common stimuli.
The house,
right?
Going into this house and finding out where the fire is, both of them.
Right. We're exposing them to a common stimuli, a red and a green ball. Right. And we're asking them to.
We have a house and a fire. I don't understand what the red and green ball is coming into this. I have a house and a fire drawn here. So what is wrong with that example as far as knowledge goes?
Why can't we stick with my example?
Well, because I drew this example and we were talking about this example. Why do we want to jump examples? I think you're trying to.
I didn't jump examples. I just saw that you drew a fire in a house.
You're confusing the hell out of things for me because I don't understand.
10 minutes ago, I raised the example of two twins, which have mostly identical experiences, being exposed to a common stimuli, a red and a green ball, and asking the twins to form a belief about a property of that ball, whether or not they believe it's comfortable or not.
Whether it's comfortable?
Yes.
I don't understand how a ball can be comfortable, but okay. And I don't understand why there's a red and a green ball. Why are there two balls? Does one twin have one ball? The other twin has. I don't understand. Your thought experiment is just all over the place. So
you're just trying to assess with the different objects what the twins believe about an object.
Okay, so how about believing that there's a fire in the second room in this house and that you get there by going up and down some stairs? That would be a belief, right?
That's not. I wouldn't say that that's a belief.
Okay, that's knowledge. That's what we were talking about originally.
Right. The fire is a brute fact, right?
What's that?
The fire is a brute fact, right?
Yeah.
And fire is something that exists. I mean, that's something that all people will agree upon as long as we have a common definition of what a fire is.
Okay, so you're trying to find something that they won't agree on. So you're trying to find a thought experiment that they wouldn't agree on. Okay.
What I'm asking of.
Okay, let's do this. Okay.
I'm trying to find my.
We have twin one and twin. I think I know what you're reaching for. You're reaching for an example where people would form a first person, basically a different belief likely on something, right? Like twin one and twin two could walk up the stairs, go down, see the little room with the fire, and twin one could say, God, I like that room, and twin two could say he didn't like that room. Wouldn't that be your example of a green and red ball?
So what I'm asking about isn't to agree upon a particular fact, right? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to see what, if based upon environments, people come to the same belief about an object, right? So with your particular example, right? I don't think people would be would be in disagreement about the fact that a fire exists.
Okay, but they could
Right.
be in disagreement about whether the room is comfortable.
What
Right.
they so with your example of the fire, what they might be in disagreement about, right, is how much of that fire there is, right? How
Okay,
much?
no. Listen to me, Immutable. I'm trying to make this your ball example. Okay, I'm trying to give you an example.
Okay.
So, okay, the green ball is comfortable, right? The fire
Yes.
is comfortable. One twin says it's comfortable in this room. The other twin says no, it isn't. I don't like it. Okay,
Right.
one twin says it's comfortable. One twin says it's not. So why can't we use that example?
We can. That's the example I was trying to use until you brought up the example of the fire.
Exactly, because I already had the house and the fire drawn, you see. So I want to stick to my knowledge example, which is okay. So now we have two twins. Okay. So what was your point? So the two twins form a different belief with exactly the same. So what point are you making that they would? Okay,
I can explain the point if you let me explain it.
yeah, they have two different beliefs. Okay,
Right. So what's been demonstrated in that case is that it is possible for two people which have had, mostly identical experiences to be, to be exposed to a common environment and form different beliefs based upon, and form different beliefs.
right. And Danny's gone through this too. So you believe that there's nothing physical that underlies that difference? Is that
No, no, my thing is that if that's the case, right? If it's in fact the case that people can form, different beliefs based upon being exposed to a common environment, right? Then
right?
to me, it doesn't mean that there isn't a set of internal environmental factors which perhaps bias or kind of direct the process of belief, right? That's
And,
not what I'm saying, but what I'm saying is that it doesn't seem that that particular explanation is sufficient to account for the types of beliefs a person forms. It might be a part of the process, but it can't be the whole process.
okay, so you're saying that the physicality can't be the whole process.
Right. I'm saying that the physicality aspect of it is more than likely part of the process, but it cannot be, in my view, the entirety of the process.
Okay, so we have the physical brain, and we have two physical brains in this case. Okay, and you would agree that no two physical brains could ever possibly be the same.
Right.
Okay, and this brain has belief one about the fire being cozy or the room being cozy, and this one has no, we triggered Scott.
I know.
We triggered Scott. Okay, so and you're saying that physicality alone, so phi alone, cannot account. It's not sufficient to account for the difference in their belief.
Right.
Okay.
That's my
Okay.
thing. I'm saying that I'm not denying that it's probably a part of the picture, but what I am saying is I don't think it can be sufficient to account for the difference in beliefs.
Yeah, and I think that would be very much what Danny's dualism is. Okay. So you're with Danny on dualism. So what do you think it is? What kind of ontological thing accounts for this difference in this belief right here? We have two different beliefs. What accounts for that?
So what I think is I think it's a set of is I think there's a physical aspect to it, of course. But I think in addition to that, there's a different type of thing playing into it. And I think part of that comes into to the respect that there's that internally there's a set of justifications that a person may derive in order to come about a belief, right? That there's a set of internal standards that a person comes to, and they determine whether or not that if those internal standards justify a particular belief in something, like the room being cozy or the room not being cozy.
And you don't think those things are physical?
No, I don't think they're physical.
Okay, so they're this kind of thing up here, the thing plus. So what is thing plus? I don't understand what thing plus is.
So to me,
Ontologically, what is it?
thing plus is an abstract.
An abstract.
Yeah, to
Okay,
me, it's an abstract object.
Thing plus itself is an abstract, or you mean it consists of abstracts?
To me, it's an abstract, right? So I can explain kind of what that means.
Okay, so
I don't think when a person appeals to when a person tries to justify something by some criteria, right? That the existence of that criteria is physical in the same way that a tree is physical. The property of that object is abstract, right?
Okay.
It could just as easily has been the case that a person chose to justify uh, the comfiness of a ball based upon its brightness in comparison to its actual color, right? The particular aspect of what they chose to justify their belief with is abstract.
And what do you think that is physically or ontologically? What is that abstract dual? That there are two kinds of substance or abstract things that are in our mind?
To me, that's the basic idea of it, is that there's two different types of objects, which are things that are abstract and things which are manifest in reality, or things that are realized.
Okay. So we
And
have
I don't see a disparity between those two.
So there's an abstract dualism. Okay, but this abstract is an actual thing, you think? Like it's an actual thing in the world?
Sure. I mean, I think that the abstract object exists within its own right, right? I don't think that. So I think it exists, but I don't think it exists in the same type of way that a tree exists or that a dog exists or the same type of thing like that.
Okay. So it exists in its own right. So it is something. It's some kind of substance.
Right. It is some kind of object. Yes.
Okay. And it only exists in minds. So it's only in minds. So in all the universe, if there aren't minds, then all the rest of the universe, all the galaxies, and
no, I would take it to a different extent. I would say that abstracts exist independent of minds.
Okay, outside, like out in the galaxy out here, there's some abstracts out here that are operating and having an effect on stars and molecules.
No. When I say outside of the mind, I don't mean that it has some influence on a mind, right? I think abstracts are categorically distinct from one another, right? And that they're not something real in the way that an atom is. Like an atom occupies some element of space, right?
Okay.
But abstracts,
good.
Abstracts are a type of thing that don't necessarily involve a notion of space, in my view.
Okay, so they don't exist in space time.
Right. They exist basically as categorically distinct objects. Right. It's a collection of different objects that one can, internalize and view.
Okay, so this plane, what does a space look like? What kind of algebraic space is it? It's just a collection, a bag of things, abstracts?
It's infinite, to me at least.
So it's infinite because it has no extension. Therefore, you can have an infinite number of abstracts inside of it.
Yes.
Wow. Have you taken drugs?
No, I don't think so.
God, maybe you should. Okay. So, I mean, that's a pretty remarkable view of the ontology of the universe. So you have an ontology of the universe where we have space-time and our objects in it, which, is where I live. And I don't believe in any of this stuff out here, you understand. I don't believe in any of it. And I can tell you why the two twins would have different preferences physically with physicality. But you believe in this additional kind of abstract. Okay, so how the fuck would we? I'm trying to figure out how we can get our minds around what these abstract objects are as a class of things, and say something about them other than that they exist. I don't quite
And
understand.
you can say a few different things about it, right? You can make a statement about the uniqueness of abstract objects. That some, arbitrary abstract object is different from some other arbitrary abstract object.
Okay, so we got A1 can be
Can be distinct from A2.
yeah, okay, so rules of logic kind of apply, or at least
Right. There's a set of internal
identity.
Right. So there's a set of internal characteristics.
Oh shit. Hey, you want to hang on for a second? Maybe you and Scott could chat about this for a minute.
How's it going there, Immutable?
It's going pretty interesting. He's finally getting to my view.
Well, good. I'm glad some progress has been being made. Although I have to admit, I've been looking at volcano videos on my phone. Volcano videos are fun.
Yep.
So what would you be doing tonight if you weren't doing this?
Probably watching anime or listening to comedy or something like that.
Gotcha.
That's what you guys chose to talk about while I was gone? You couldn't elaborate?
So to get back to your thing, Speed, yes. There are some set of internal characteristics. There's something which there are a set of rules by which abstracts, are different from one another, right? Like adhering to the law of identity or something like that.
Yeah, so we have some. So that means that they would have. We could draw properties from them, maybe.
Right. So to me, at least, it seems reasonable to say that you can derive properties based upon these abstract objects that exist.
So to clarify, you don't believe the mind is entirely physical.
I think the mind isn't. I think the mind is entirely physical. I think it's something akin to software.
What's it? Okay, could you say you think it is entirely physical?
Yes, I think the mind is entirely physical.
But it's software.
Yeah. So if the brain is the structure that kind of has these different types of structures in it that are responsible for different features, to me, what the mind is it's a set of processes that are operating within that space, within that collection of meat.
But do they only operate in brains, these abstracts? These process abstracts or software abstracts?
To me, I think they apply to all different types of things.
Okay. Like what?
So, I think when we say, like, oh, that mountain is brown, we're appealing... When we're referring to something, I think that's, that there's a collection of abstracts being referred to by that, by that statement. Particularly an abstract which refers to brown and an abstract which refers to a mountain.
Okay. I don't know why you would hold such a view. I really don't, but it's it's bizarre and interesting. So
no, to me, I can explain that.
Brains are entirely physical, but they're not.
No, brains and minds are entirely physical.
But they're not. Because they have these abstract objects in them, and they're not in space-time. So we can't explain them with physics, with space-time. There's something unexplained about the mind.
Brains and minds have representations of abstract objects. But abstract objects do not depend on brains for their existence.
Okay. Okay, so give me an example of an abstract object that doesn't depend on a brain for existence.
The number 0, right?
Okay,
to me, the number 0 is a number that has, specific mathematical properties. It has, it has its identity because of those properties.
How does the number 0 affect matter?
How does the number 0 affect matter?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily affect matter per se. It's a number that can be used to quantify something, like there's no water in the refrigerator, or there is no sulfur dioxide on the planet.
Yeah, but we're not talking about humans. We're talking about you said abstracts can exist without humans, so I'm trying to take humans out of the equation entirely. So you can't say anything that humans would say about water. It's basically there's zero something in the universe that's an abstract, extant abstract object. It's A1. Right?
Yeah. So to me, what you're asking, my answer is the abstract object exists by virtue of its properties, which define it.
Okay. Let's maybe we'll try a different approach. The fuck did I do with my fire?
I mean, another way of phrasing that is, if you're asking me what does it mean, like, for what is sufficient for an abstract to exist? Well, the set of objects which define those abstracts have to be true, right?
What set of objects defines zero?
The property that 0 plus some other number is the number. The fact that 0 times another number is 0.
If those are properties of numbers, not zero.
That's a property of 0 itself, right? 0 has a property, it has a property of relation to other numbers, which causes it to be distinguished from other numbers.
And, number systems are built on relationships. So when you say 1 plus 0 equals 0, you have a system of numbers that have an identity relationship in them. So I wouldn't go there. But let's try to go back to our twins, because there's something that I don't understand. There's something I don't understand. Okay, twin 1 thinks the room is wonderful and warm, and twin 2 hates the fucking room. Just fucking hates it. Doesn't like it. Doesn't think it's comfortable. Okay.
Sure.
So these two twins are different. So you do understand that this delta here is that their brains are not physically the same, right? On this matter, if we could somehow dig in and compare how they formed that, how basically they expressed that belief when you asked them about it, if we could find the mechanics, you believe that we would find entirely neurons firing and physical things happening, right?
Right.
Okay. So obviously they came to that belief through some mechanism in the physical realm, in that Cartesian physical time-space realm. Something changed in their brain, something where they were interacting with the environment. They made slightly different neural paths that made one of them hate the room and the other one like it. You believe that because you said the mind is all physical, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So how is that different than my view?
So with what you're saying, right? So first of all, to kind of respond to what you've been saying, it's not the brains we're worried about in terms of coming to knowledge, right? It should be the environment and the process by which the environments act on brains, because we know already that there are instances where brains that are very different in terms of composition and experiences can observe a common phenomenon and come to the same conclusion, right?
So multiple realization, yeah.
Right, and so it's not the brain which seems to establish sufficiency in terms of belief, or in your case, and it doesn't also appear to be just environment, right? Because if it was just the environment, if we did put two twins, with mostly identical brain states into a room and they come to different conclusions, well, it should follow that they come to identical beliefs about the object, and they don't.
But so to me, they were different going into the room. I mean, they can't be the same thing,
right? But different people. That explanation, right, is also runs the other way, right? We can have people that that have different brain states that do agree upon a particular characteristic, like the room is comfy, right?
Yeah, because there's multiple realizability of basically human reduced brain states.
Right. And so to me, the fact that brains are different isn't sufficient for that either, right? Because the fact that you can have both the case that different brains arrive to the same conclusion and also arrive at different conclusions doesn't tell you anything about the process of coming to knowledge. What does seem to come to tell you about knowledge, though, is if you suppose that there's a set of internal characteristics or a set of internal criteria a person uses when it comes to forming a belief.
Okay.
And to me, that's what I hold to, right? That there are a set of abstract objects that a person draws upon in terms of when they are trying to form a belief on an object, right? And essentially what they're doing is based upon that set of abstracts and criteria that they're drawing upon, they're trying to determine whether or not, a belief in, like a belief that the room is comfortable, is consistent with, with their notion, with the notion of the abstract object and, what that entails.
What is
If that
the
with their
go ahead.
internal
Finish? I'm sorry.
No, I was. So, I mean, to reiterate it, to me, what's happening is that there's a set of abstract objects that people are drawing upon, as internal criteria. And what people are then doing is they're saying, is that belief, is the belief that I'm, trying to form consistent or not with that internal criteria? And if it is, they form a belief. If it's not, they don't form a belief.
Okay. I just don't see where that gets you, but so we have abstract objects and we have a brain. And where are the abstract objects? They're outside of the brain?
Right. They exist outside of the brain. That, like I said earlier, they exist as, as their own class of objects.
They're kind of spirit.
Well, not spirits. I mean, they're just distinct little objects.
Okay, can you show me one of these things?
I can show you a representation of it, but not really the thing itself.
Can you operate on it? Can you tell me can you tell me how a brain acquires these things?
A brain acquires one of these things by picking one of them out.
By picking one out. What would be the physicality of a brain picking one of these things out?
It's determined by the set of, electrochemical circuits.
Okay. So electrical chemical circuits pick out an abstract. I don't know. I'm lost. I have no idea where to go. This is why I like my method better, to tell you the truth. Because I have no idea where you can go with this.
The problem we seem to run into, though, so to me, the way it gets resolved is that certain activities in the brain, right, relate to some of these abstract objects. So some processes that the mind engages in, right, have a relation to the abstract notion of color, whereas some other, electrochemical circuits that run in the brain have a relationship to, texture or space or depth or things like that, right? And those particular iterations of electrochemical circuits, and the changes that those electrochemical circuits undergo, to me, seems to be how minds pick out, how minds establish criteria, or how minds are picking out abstract objects.
Yeah, but how do they even acquire these abstract objects?
How do they acquire these abstract objects?
Yeah, if they pick them out, what do they pick them out from? How do they acquire them? How do they apprehend these abstract objects? The brains.
It acquires it based upon its own set of desires.
What? Wait a minute. Okay. Desire.
So, to me, there's a desire of a mind or of a body to do X, right?
Okay.
And if there's some process, or if there's something which helps in acquiring that object or something like that, right, then that's what the brain will try to pick out within reason.
But we're talking about an abstract object. How does the brain come to know this abstract object? The set of abstract objects to pick it out.
I don't think it can. I think it just, in some way it tries to develop its own idea of these abstract objects. I don't. So to your question, I don't think it's possible for a mind to understand the set of all abstract objects.
Okay.
And that's why I think, in terms of minds, what we do is minds engage in a process where we develop our own notion of an abstract object.
Okay, so you said that this is the set of all abstract objects. So this set of abstracts right here, right? And you said there's some that we know and some that are unknown.
Yeah.
Okay. So you divided them. So how do they move between these? Do some abstract objects that we don't know become known?
I think historically, yes. I think in some cases,
that's what I mean by apprehend. How do we acquire this knowledge of these abstract objects?
Right. So that boat goes back. So essentially, answering that question establishes what abstract objects are built from, right? So in my view, abstract objects are built upon elementary propositions, right? And the way we come to understand abstract objects, or the way we come to form abstract objects, is when we as people develop propositions about the world, whether or not the room is comfortable or not, right? We take a proposition and we try to relate it in some way to another proposition about the world, right? And we see what the result of trying to relate those two together becomes. And if that result is cogent or consistent, what that thing refers to is some abstract object. Because abstract objects, definitionally, to me at least, are defined by stringing together some some set of propositions.
Okay, what are propositions physically?
What are propositions physically?
Yeah, in the brain.
I'm not. I'd have to rethink that because I'm not sure they are.
Physical things.
I'm not sure they are physical things. I mean, I think that the types of things that electrochemical gradients do acting on the brain kind of can express propositions, but I'm not sure they're equivalent to propositions.
Okay. Okay. Yep. You and I are about as far apart as the fucking Andromeda and Milky Way. So
I mean, they're coming together pretty soon. So
yeah, well,
5 million years, they'll be right on top of each other.
Yep, but I'm sure we'll come together in 5 million years too.
So I mean, what's your impression of my view?
I think it's very confused, and it exists in a space that would be semantics, language, and culture, and you're inside of basically it's a language game that we play when we usually talk about epistemology, and I think it hashes out mostly to, I don't want to use that word, but it hashes out as a confused, incoherent view that you would have to explain and explain and explain for the next 10 centuries, and you still wouldn't get to the bottom of it. Whereas I believe my scientism approach can ground all that stuff and come up with an explanation much more rapidly, in real time. In what do they call
it? To me, I mean, this is a different type of thing, but to me, trying to develop an explanation kind of assumes that there is something to be explained, right?
Yep. Knowledge is something to be explained. Basically how knowledge works in human beings is something to be explained.
Right. I mean, to me, I think there's a limit to which we can do that, because I think, to me, it seems like there comes a point philosophically where you come to a decision about what types of rules you're going to establish when you form or when you engage searching out beliefs, or trying to address whether or not some belief is likely to be true or not. Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me, it just comes down to some kind of brute, it boils to some kind of brute fact about, look, that there has to be something at the root of this all that grounds it. And whether you call that abstracts or whether you call that science, I'm not sure. But to me, I mean, I see there being, to me at least, there seems to be conceptual barriers in regards to the type of view you're putting forth.
Okay. Can you think of one?
Yes, I mean, what I was saying earlier, if we had two twins which have the same, the same mind and the same set of mental states, right, prior to this experience, and you now expose them to a common stimuli, so you now expose them to the same object, and they come to different beliefs about the object. To me, what that says is that the process of forming beliefs cannot be something that is simply a result of physicality.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
there's nothing running behind the scenes.
Okay. You understand that most cognitive neuroscientists would disagree with you, right?
To which aspect?
That what you just said, that we couldn't physically hash out the difference between these two twins, because no cognitive neuroscience scientists would ever say that they can have the same mind just because they're twins. In fact, the position. Hang on a second here. I'm gonna throw one more spanner at you. Basically, my mind 5 minutes ago was not identical to my mind now. Very different things. Okay, as different, almost as different as these two twins, right? So if you have two twins, they obviously can't occupy the same space and do exactly the same things and have exactly the same inputs. You understand that physicality is much more complicated. So there's no way that their brains could be the same. And when they walk into the room, just the fact that they walk into the room not at the same time is going to have some effect on what happens to them in their brain. And if we looked at their brains, even if we raised two twins in exactly the same environment, like we put them in let's say we put our two twins in a box when they were born, and we exposed them to exactly the same stimuli all of their lives, right? So we give them the same stimuli. And then we looked at their brains. We would not find the same synaptic wiring telling us how they acquired the abstract of a square, okay, or the abstract of zero. It would be a very different wiring. It would be a very different network, just because there is no way for them to be the same when they walked in.
Okay, so I mean, are you essentially pushing back on the idea that it's impossible for two beings to have the same mind in every aspect?
I don't think even I have never had the same mind as I ever had before or ever will again. That every moment is very, very unique in the universe. So Icarus.
If you could replicate the mind perfectly, including all the experiences and all that, do you think the hypothetical still doesn't follow? Or
okay, if we could clone you, we could clone me and make an exact duplicate of me and clone the environment that I'm in and make an exact duplicate of that environment. So all physical things coming in were identical. Then in that case, I would have the same exact mind until something different happened, and then it would diverge.
Well, right. That's the point of the hypothetical, right? It's to say that, look, imagine that there's two individuals which have had the exact same set of experiences in the exact same set of hypothetical dispositions, right? Prior to an event, right? Prior to being brought in this room and being exposed to the object and having a belief formed on that object, right? And to me, right, I think you agree with it, that if it's the case that the two people form two different beliefs on the object, despite having identical experiences prior to that, then physicality doesn't be a sufficient explanation for why there's two different beliefs.
Okay, but my belief is that if they were exact clones, if you clone me exactly, including this environment that I'm in, so that I was holding this pen up, pointing out the microphone in exactly the same way, everything is identical, and the two environments that we were cloned into did exactly the same things for the next 5 minutes, then I would say that we would have exactly the same mind state. We would have exactly the same mind. There's no way we could form a different belief from one another. We would be identical in every respect. This hypothetical involves a complete duplication of a physical chunk of space, let's say 50 or 100 feet outside of my house, me included.
Sure.
We duplicate it. The same exact things happen in time, then we would have the same mind because of physicality.
I don't see
You would
anything about that. Sure, so I don't see anything about that hypothetically being impossible.
Being impossible?
Yeah.
Okay, so you agree with me that we would have exactly the same mind going forward if the universe proceeded in exactly the same way. Okay. So how does that...
So to me, what I don't understand, and I mean, this might be a whole different conversation we need to have, because I actually do think we've made progress here, is kind of why you think it's the case that it's impossible for two minds which have been predisposed to the same set of environmental stimuli and same processes, to come to different, for why it's the case that they cannot come to different conclusions about a particular phenomenon.
Okay, if the environment and if the brain's going into the box, or into our timeline, into our T0, okay, we'll draw T0, as a point where we're making them identical, right? And the things going in are identical, and everything that happens to them physically is identical, then they will continue to be identical. Okay, there's nothing that will allow them to acquire two different beliefs. And I think what you were saying is that they could acquire two different beliefs. But now you seem to be agreeing with me that they couldn't. Which one?
To me, that's a statement like the black swan fallacy, right? So I mean, what I view as problemsome here, right, is I don't see why, in this case, I don't see why it's the case that if two agents have held the same beliefs and the same mental processes for some given interval of time, and now we expose them to a new phenomenon, why it must be the case that they come to a conclusion, to the exact same conclusion about this new object.
It's not the case because they're not identical, and because the exposure to that new situation is not identical. So there's nothing identical about the two trajectories, the twins. There cannot be anything identical about the twins.
Right, but you granted for the sake of argument that they could be identical hypothetically.
Hypothetically, if everything was identical, including how they were situated in space, how they moved, and everything that happened to them, then they would have identical states. They would not have different beliefs. Okay.
Right, but So I'm saying under that hypothetical, I don't see why that's the case.
You don't see why that's the case, that they would have exactly the same beliefs.
Right. I don't see why it's the case that there can't be an indeterminacy between the types of beliefs that the agents form.
Okay, I guess that would go to whether or not we have a determinate universe or not, because there's a possibility, like, okay, if a butterfly flaps its wings, if a quantum state is slightly different or hatches out differently, we don't know that. So we don't know if that kind of determinism. But I'm saying, but my hypothetical is thus. Hang on a second, I added a new fucking page here. New page. Give me a new page. Okay. So my hypothetical is that we have the organism right here, okay, and we clone it exactly. Okay, and not only that, but we have the space around the organism is cloned exactly. And okay, as that space transforms over here, and as the organism transforms, everything physically about this, everything that we could measure in space-time physicality, is identical. There's no indeterminacy in quantum states. So we're not talking about physical indeterminacy, right? And
Right.
these two things would necessarily be identical. They would be necessarily equal. They would have exactly the same brain.
Right. To the
mind.
point. Right. To the point of exposure. Right. To the point of exposure to the. Right. Prior to the point of exposure to the stimuli. Right.
Okay, so
And so what I'm saying is that given something is introduced to the system like a new stimuli, right? What I perceive is that there's a possibility that for whatever reason, right, one agent comes to one conclusion about the object and the other comes to another conclusion about the object.
okay, so now, so they were identical up to this point, absolutely identical, and they're still identical. They're necessarily still identical as they go into this next state where they're exposed to this new stimuli right here, right? This new
Right.
stimuli.
And what I'm saying is that the exposure to a new state can cause a difference, in the types of beliefs that the agents form.
Okay, so the exposure to the state, to these two absolutely identical things, okay, right here, the exposure to the exact same state, the exact same universe, they're in exactly the same posture, same position. You're saying that they will have B1 not equal to B2 is possible.
Right. And the
Okay.
reason so the reason I say that, right, is although it may be true that these two individuals have had the exact same set of experiences and responses to the same set of environmental stimuli to to whatever before having this shared event, that doesn't necessarily entail that some new event that's introduced will cause them to respond the same, right? That because to me that's an iteration of the black swan fallacy. Because what the black swan fallacy is saying, right, is saying that because something has been the case, like for a prolonged period of time, right? The person who's only seen white swans their entire life, right? They now come to a belief, right, and justifiably so, based upon those experiences, that white swans are all that exist, right? And in this case, the corollary with that is saying that the justification you seem to be using is that since it's the case that these people are identical and have the same set of shared experiences and mental states and all that prior to the moment of being exposed to a stimuli, that necessarily instantiates the fact that they will have the same belief about these two objects. And to
Yeah,
me, it's too strong of a claim.
because they're
Right.
identical. They're identical in their environment, their world, their universe is identical. They've split into two different, two timelines, and everything's identical. Of course, that could never happen. But yeah, they're identical, so they would form exactly the same belief.
Right, but to
And
me,
that I don't understand how that has anything to do with black swans, unless you're talking about them, the events being a gaggle of white swans or a black swan appearing. I guess
so
I'm taking you in the wrong direction, ain't I?
do you understand that the reason, like the black swan fallacy is being invoked is that the structure of the black swan fallacy is to say that when we have observed one set of phenomenon, right, for a prolonged period of time, right, we cannot say that phenomenon is the only phenomenon, right, or will continue to be that phenomenon for all time.
Okay, I don't understand what that has to do with what happens to the organisms in their belief. I mean,
So here's
there's
how
no way that that doesn't hash out. Let me think about this for a second. Okay, so we have a world where there are a bunch of white swans,
yes,
and I'm what the fuck just happened? Oh, something bad happened. Something bad happened.
right. So there's a world of white swans, and a person has only ever observed white swans,
Right.
right? And this is the framing of the white swan fallacy or the black swan fallacy. And a person, throughout their entire life has observed only white swans. But then, the person makes a claim about a future state, being that there must only be white swans which exist.
Okay.
Right? But that cannot follow, right?
Right.
The fact that there have only been white swans, or the person has only observed white swans prior, right, to this point of time, doesn't negate the possibility that there could be that the next step a person takes, he sees a black swan, right?
Right.
That's the point of the black swan or the black swan fallacy. And the corollary here is we're saying that there's some set of environmental stimuli which ground people in terms of their beliefs, right? And because of the consistency of that framework, they have formed similar beliefs their entire lives. And where the black swan fallacy is invoked now is in saying that since it has been the case that these people have formed the same beliefs for their entire life, prior to this event, then it must be the case that these individuals will now form the same belief in regards to a new stimuli.
Yeah, it must be the case if they have exactly the same stimuli and they are identical. So it must be the case. It's necessary. I would say it's necessarily the case. And we know that if we are physicalists and we believe that the mind is entirely physical and that the world is entirely physical and that there's nothing else, then we know that must be the case because these are going to be identical objects, right?
Okay. In that case, I'm saying it's fallacious and it's invalid.
No, it's not fallacious. It's a difference in what we're saying. It's a difference in our worldview. You believe that there's something else here that exists besides this physicality that can vary. You think there can be variance, and I don't, and that's not a fallacy, and it has nothing to do with the black swan fallacy. Okay. We differ in how we fundamentally ontologically view the universe.
Right, but even that difference aside, right, the internal structure of the argument falls victim to the black swan fallacy.
No, my argument doesn't have anything to do with black swans. I'm not saying we're not talking about how I believe that these two things forever and ever are going to be the same. That's not what I'm saying. It just doesn't hash out to a black swan fallacy at all. So please stop using that.
What I'm understanding your claim to be is that given a hypothetical where two people have experienced the same exact phenomenon, right, and that is common, that is agreed upon, right, that it follows necessarily as the case that they must form the same belief upon a set of new upon being exposed to some new variable or some new stimuli. And to me, that's the exact form the black swan fallacy takes. Why? Because what the black swan fallacy is saying is that based upon one observation of an event, right, or multiple observations of the same event, in this case, seeing white swans, a person is now making a justification based upon, upon the future, which is that they will not see, is that white swans will be the thing that they always will see, and that is not justified.
But my view is justified because I'm talking about a world here where there cannot be black swans. Okay, I'm talking about a different. I'm hitting it from a different direction. There cannot be black swans. So basically, I'm telling you that these two things cannot possibly have a different belief.
I don't know. Okay, I don't know how you've come to the conclusion that there cannot be swans other than the color white in this case.
Well, I'm comparing that to my ontological view that the mind is entirely physical. Okay, entirely physical. It's completely subsumed by the physicality of this space here.
Yeah,
and the object in it. Okay, so that is identical. So that is the equivalent to me saying that there cannot possibly be white swans because I don't believe that there's this extra dual substance that you believe in. So you believe in a dual, I don't. So
No, I don't. I don't think this has. In this case, this has nothing to do with dualism, right? Because to me, what the reason I say that it's invalid in this particular case is that while it might be the case that we understand the people to have had the same conclusion on every observation they've had prior to this event,
you
right?
can't call it, okay, you're doing something funny here. You're calling them people, okay? We're talking about exact
These
hypothetical
right? These
clones.
people, these agents, whatever you wish to call them, right?
Clones.
That's
Clones. Let's call them exact clones. And they're
fine.
in,
So,
okay, so
right, for the fact that
the
these,
universe has split into two timelines here that are absolutely identical. Absolutely
right,
identical. Everything about the
right,
universe. Okay.
right. But so the fact that these two clones have had the same experiences prior to, an exposure to prior to this new type of thing, right? What you have to do, right, is you have to infer something about the effect of the object on a person's brain state, and you have to make a very strong claim in this case in regards to the effects being identical on both brain states.
Yes, I am making that very strong claim. That's pure physicalism. That there's exactly the same. That the mind is exactly the brain,
Okay,
and
but
nothing
my
else.
my thing is that so my justification for claiming that it can't be the case is that number one, you can't know the effect that a random stimuli will have on the brain, right? We don't have a level of control as to how we will perceive and
But it's,
observe
but
something,
it's
even
not random. It's identical in both cases because they're in the same universe.
what I mean by random is like I don't mean random in the case of like the agents. I mean random in the sense that what what stimuli we present them with, right? The choice of stimuli is entirely arbitrary.
No, it
But
isn't because these are identical universes, so they're going to have the same stimuli. And
in
if let, let me ask you this, okay? Now, if twin one up here, this is twin one, right, and twin two, basically. Okay, now they come out here. Now they're in this universe. They've been exposed to this other object here. They've seen a black swan or whatever. Okay, so they both universes are exactly the same. The same thing physically is happening, and now one has one belief and one has another belief. How can these two universes still be identical? Something had to change those universes, right? Right here. Something had to change them. What did it?
what did it? I would answer that it's the result of non-determinacy.
Non-determinacy, which would mean that are you talking about physical non-determinacy and quantum mechanics, where something could possibly hash out differently if we split timelines? Well, if that's the case, then our hypothetical doesn't work because
No,
we've already diverged, right? So, I mean, if you're saying
referring to
non-determinacy, no, hang on a second. If you're saying if you're going to pull non-determinacy on me, then there's no way that these two things would not already diverge. Okay,
what
we're
I'm
saying that
referring
they haven't
to.
diverged; they're identical. How can you pull non-determinacy on me?
I'm referring to non-determinacy both in a modal sense, but also in the sense of physics, right? So to
Okay.
me, one of the reasons is that I don't view the universe as being entirely deterministic.
Yeah, but I don't either necessarily. I don't know. I'm agnostic on that point. But our hypothetical insists that it is identical and that identical things are happening to the mind. If something different happens to the mind, Immutable, of course there's a possibility for there to be divergence here. You're
Right.
saying what you're saying is that everything's identical, but if something changes, and I'm saying everything's identical, if something changes, I'm going to agree with you that there can be a difference. I mean, if there's a difference, then there is a difference. That's tautological.
Right. What I'm saying is that even if it were the case, right? So even if I were to grant the case that the universes are physically different or physically identical to each other, right? And that the universe and that the universe does obey a set of entirely deterministic rules,
Right.
the result still would be indeterminacy. And the reason for that is when we subject these people to a common stimuli, there exists a logical possibility that that a person may come to one belief about the object, and a person may come to a second belief about the object. Right? There is nothing in about the
Nothing logically wrong with it, but there's something physically wrong with it, because what you're saying is that there's no indeterminacy up to this point, and then all of a sudden there is.
right.
And I'll grant you that if something changes here, basically, in the physical substance of these two individuals, then of course something different can happen. But if nothing changes physically, then they can't possibly have different beliefs.
Right. Okay. What I'm saying is that the fact that there's a logical possibility for determinacy to be broken means that you can't claim that determinacy can be necessarily maintained. Right. The fact that
if determinacy breaks, then fine. Then yes, these two things are going to diverge. I never said they wouldn't. If something changes, then yes, physically. If something changes physically right here at this point, at this line, then I agree they could be different in the future. Right. I'm not saying I'm not claiming they're going to be the same forever, or that I can predict, that determinacy is never going to break. I can't predict that. I can't do that. That would be the not the black swan, but induction. Basically the problem of induction. I mean, I can't determine what's going to happen out here, but I can tell you that if these two things are identical here, and they've been exposed to identical things, and they're going to have an identical mind unless determinacy breaks.
Right. What I'm trying to say is the fact that modally there's the possibility for that not to be maintained is sufficient to say that there can be a different result.
Hold on a second. Scott's quitting?
Yeah, Scott's quitting.
Scott? I thought you were going to help us or help me.
Well, y'all been doing fine yourselves, but y'all been doing this for like an hour and a half.
Yeah, we're going to quit soon anyway, so.
And my brain hurts.
Yeah,
so
yeah, we all got to quit.
Make sure you sweep the floors, turn out the lights, and lock up. You can take the trash out in the morning.
Are you going to start singing that Cheers theme song?
That's at the beginning of the show. So.
Okay. Anyway, I'm just wondering. Okay. Anyway, I think we should wrap it up because I am burning out at this point.
Yeah. I mean, to kind of reiterate, my own belief is that, to me, it seems sufficient to say that the fact that modally there's a possibility for the determinacy to be broken, right, is sufficient to say that determinacy can possibly be non-maintained.
Yeah.
Because what it implies is that if there's a possibility for the physical state to be different, it means that it's physically possible for, whatever permits for that physical state to exist to have changed.
Yeah, and there would be an underlying change in it. Basically, I think the next thing to unpack is maybe supervenience, because sure. I think that would help this conversation, but I can't do it tonight.
No, I mean, as interesting as this, I mean, as kind of like circular as this conversation has kind of drawn itself toward, I do think we've made progress in terms of kind of understanding, the hypothetical and
understanding each other. So
yeah, I mean, I think you've understood my view, and I think I kind of understand your view more.
Yeah. So that's progress, I guess. Okay. Yeah, I think you'd get along with Danny's dualism, because I think he might. But it would be interesting to have him listen to what you said and comment on whether or not he believed it. Because at one time I walked him through the same experiment on one of Jay. I think it was on Jay's stream. And I believe he said the same thing that you just said, that the two beliefs could be different, even though the physical, everything was identical. And I don't, and then he later denied having said that. So I'm not entirely sure if he would agree with everything you said. I'd be interested in you two talking about this and see if you agree on everything that you just said. That would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Danny, if we fix speed. We're working on it. But
Yeah, you guys are, you guys are so fucking lost in your fucking semantics and language games that don't fucking give me this shit about you fixing me, because I'm gonna fucking fix you guys eventually. If I live long enough, I'm not sure if I can, but God, you guys are lost. You say the damnedest things. I mean, I don't see any difference in believing in abstract objects and this dualism in the manner that you believe in it between believing in that and believing in God. I mean, it's exactly, I don't know why you guys aren't Christians. I don't understand. But you guys, you both used to be Christians, right?
Yeah. I
Okay.
don't see believing in abstract objects being anything related to the existence of God, but okay. I mean, if you want to claim that, that's fine.
God is kind of an abstract object, right? So I don't know. So anyway, don't give me this "you're going to fix me" shit. You haven't budged me a bit yet, because I don't think anything that you presented was consistent, and I can't figure out why. I can't figure out what you would say.
I don't know how or why it's not consistent, but I know it's not consistent. Okay, Jesus Christ.
No, I know it's not consistent, but I don't know how to express it to you exactly. Other than that, you're appealing to something outside this delta here, this outside thing that would be different in this case, but you're not wanting to appeal to the fact that the physicality, or you're not wanting to say that the physical would be different. I mean, I agree with you. If the physical diverges right here at that point, then yes, two different things can happen with very similar things starting. It's like a butterfly flapping its wings, right? Your brain is very much like butterfly susceptible. If a neuron, fires differently in this guy than it does in this guy, you could end up with, one could end up a Republican and the other one a Democrat. I mean, that's not, they even have split brain split brain people where one is a Christian and one's an atheist. I mean, and then split brains basically you would think would be about as identical as you could fucking get. But anyway, so there's what the fuck? Anyway, it just surprises me that you can't, like, we started here, right, going from this state to this state, and then you wanted to go to another state, and it's no different no matter how many states you have here. If everything is identical and everything is identical, then mind will be identical. If the underlying physicality, okay, basically mind supervenes on the underlying physicality. There cannot be a change in the mind without there being an accompanying change in physicality of the brain. So if there's a difference between these two individuals, these two individuals both supervene on that physical. So they both supervene on B, right? Now we're unpacking supervenience a little bit. Yeah, there cannot be a change in A without a corresponding change in B.
Yeah, to me, what I derive is that the modal possibility for change implies that the physical world itself must permit for that change to be plausible. If in fact the modal possibility for that change, is correct.
So what you're talking about is supervenience breaking. That supervenience wouldn't hold.
Yeah, essentially, I think that's a conversation for a different day, though.
Yeah. Okay. We'll wrap it up. Immutable. That was good.
All right.
Okay, so we're gonna end the stream. Goodbye, cruel world.
Goodbye.
What the hell am I gonna do tonight? Oh, I'm watching an interesting series called 000 on Amazon Prime, which is their ripoff of Narcos, but it's really good. Anyway, I suggest it. So any broadcast